Hello everyone, my name is Nimai Hedemark, and today, after having spent the week watching The Last Dance, a documentary about the Bulls on Netflix, if you haven't seen it, it's quite engaging. I thought it might be fun to have a look at Michael Jordan's chart. For a long time, there was a time being, I guess you could say, floating around the internet that put him as an Aries Lagna or an Aries rising sign. You'll notice if you go to KRS's channel that he has a video on Michael Jordan's chart, and he is reading it from Aries Lagna. But at some point in time, Michael Jordan's birth certificate got auctioned, and the accurate time has been learned. And it's quite a few hours later. So, without further ado, why don't we have a look at Michael Jordan's chart? So, this gives us a birth time of 1:40 p.m. on February 17, 1963, in Brooklyn, New York. We have a Gemini Lagna with Mercury in the 8th house, Lagna Lord in the 8th house, Mars Rahu in Cancer in the 2nd, Moon in the 6th, Venus in the 7th, and Jupiter Sun in the 9th. We have a Navamsa Lagna of Pisces with Mercury, and we see Saturn and Mars and the Sun in trine, as well as Venus in the 7th. This Mercury-Venus is showing that he's a very attractive person, right? Michael Jordan's a handsome man. And in trine to Saturn, Mars, and the Sun shows someone who's very physically capable, right? That he's very talented, and that especially with coaching, that his, that he would become more and more talented. Mercury in the Lagna, it makes him someone who's a capable speaker on one level, but Mercury is also the karaka for athletics and things done with your body, Mercury and Mars. And we have this Mercury-Mars combination. They're helping each other. So we from the Navamsa, we're getting a sense of him being an athletic person. Now, going to the Rashi, what I really kind of wanted to point out was how we have this Mars, Rahu, Ketu, Saturn, Mercury combination. This is very intense axis between the 2nd and the 8th house, right? And this axis, obviously, is going to be very dominant in his life. And it's going to have a very profound effect. Now, when you're studying Jyotish, we have to be very careful to look at the picture broadly and to take into account positive and negative. We don't just simply label something good or bad, right? Initially, if we looked at this, we would think this is horrible. This is very intense, right? The Lagna Lord in the 8th house being just trashed by all the malefics. And we can say definitely that this is a dire combination. In fact, we know that one of the most tragic experiences of Michael Jordan's life is the death of his father. That took place during Venus, Mars, Saturn Dasha, and it's this Mars Rahu combination that has a very big part to play in that. Right? So if we were going to look at a negative, we could point that out immediately. Oh, this is like, Mars Rahu's like in the right place. It's murder, like murder yoga, right? But we'd also have to be careful because if we take a little deeper look, and we can show how this combination has played out to be a great blessing in his life. We know that this Mercury, right? This Mercury is in Digbala in the Lagna of the Navamsa chart. This is the blessings of Vishnu, right? And it's receiving Nichabanga So it will become even more strong. This is going to be someone, this Mercury is greatly fortunate, right? And so we'd have to be careful not to make a false judgment about what this Mercury means here, because of the fact that it's so beautiful in the Navamsa. Now, Michael Jordan as a character is someone who is intensely competitive, who has this just indomitable spirit, an ability to hit the gas pedal, and even in moments of tremendous weakness, push himself in such a way to achieve what is practically speaking the unachievable, right? Extraordinary amongst the extraordinary, as David Goggins would say. And when we look here in the Rashi, we see that, we have to take into account that Mercury is like, he's the natural lord of the third house. And the third house is about contracts and boundaries and competition, right? It's the natural house of competition. And when it's afflicted by all these malefics, there's this, on one hand, it's people crossing your own boundaries, but it's also a willingness, it'll push you a willingness to cross their boundaries. It's like a war in of itself. We have this Mars against Mercury thing going on here, which is like a war. And now, don't get me wrong, there is something called Graha Yuddha, and that's not what's happening here. But we're just talking about flavor, right? So this Mercury is being pushed to be very, very competitive, and he's reckless with his body, right? The first lord in the eighth is reckless with his body. And then we have this Parivartana between Mars and the Moon. Now, this is a kind of touchy yoga, this combination here. We have Mars debilitated and Moon debilitated. Both of them are showing an emotional, someone who holds a grudge, someone who it's very difficult for them to forget any kind of a slight. And it's very difficult for them to let go of hard feelings, right? Like right now, Michael Jordan's copping a lot of flack for his Hall of Fame speech where he was kind of venting, right? How long had he held on to so many, bad feelings? And that, at the same time, that's part of what is pushing him to be so intensely competitive. We have this Moon in the sixth house. This is like the natural house of battle. It's like having your mind in the battlefield all the time, right? And this Mars is retrograded, which means that it's acting from a place of Icha, or desire. Retrograde planets move like Rahu or Ketu. They're going with the flow of desire rather than the natural flow, right? And so this Mars becomes incredibly indomitable. It's fighting spirit, right? It's indomitable. Mars in Cancer alone is actually one of the placements that you would say is practically undefeatable, because they are so determined. They really dig their heels in, and they don't quit. Some might say it's a kind of like a overcompensation. They have to try double hard. But in this case, it's a little bit different. The retrogradation itself also shows like going from a place of debilitation to moving towards exaltation, right? It's like starting poor and then ending rich. And the Mars itself is also being blessed in the Navamsa chart. It's in its own house in the ninth, right? So this is another big blessing. This Mars is a blessing. This Mercury is a blessing. And the Saturn is also a kind of it's definitely a kind of a blessing. So everything that's involved here is kind of a blessing. And yet, we can't deny it's Mars and Rahu and Ketu and Saturn. So there's going to be some bitter pills that have to be swallowed, right? When we go to the Dashamsha, we get an even more unique picture. I think I get a kind of a kick out of this. In the Lagna of the Dashamsha, we have Mercury and Moon, and we have Saturn and Rahu in the 5th house, and we have Mars over here in the 9th. The Lagna Lord of the Dashamsha is Jupiter, and he's in the 11th house with Ketu, right? And we have Venus over here in the 7th. So, we get a picture, first of all, of someone who's quite chatty. Mercury, Moon, right? Fun-loving, chatty, aspected by Venus. He's enjoying himself very much, doing what he's doing. And then at the same time, what's the nature of this this chatty? He's a prolific shit talker, right? You have Saturn and Rahu and Mars. He was an excellent trash talker, and he was very intense with his teammates, and you see this very strongly in this Saturn Rahu in the 5th house. You get a someone who would maybe be perceived as being unfair, unkind, unfair, a little like pushing too hard, maybe selfish, right? It might feel like that. And certainly he wasn't someone who was trying to make friends. He was trying to win, and he was trying to push his team. You see that he's the Jupiter Lagna. He's actually there in the 11th house, almost like a teacher, and he's trying to push his teammates to achieve more, right? You see this a lot in the documentary. But the experience that they're having is Saturn Rahu. It's kind of intense. Now, this Mercury-Moon combination, I get a kick out of because Mercury-Moon in tradition is called Vayu Yoga. And Vayu is the lord of the wind. So, Air Jordan has Vayu Yoga in the Lagna of his D10. And the effect of that Vayu Yoga is seen in the 10th house, so it colors the description of how he does his work. Vayu Yoga. Now going back to the Rashi, we're going to go back to this Mars-Rahu combination, and we're going to just point out that Michael Jordan is one of a very small group of billionaires. If we look at billionaires overall, and amongst African Americans, I think he's one of 5. So in order to achieve that, we need to have a Dana Yoga that's quite significant, right? A Dana Yoga is the involvement of the 11th house, the 2nd house, and a Kendra or trine lord, or Kendra trine, right? We have Mars as the 11th lord in the 2nd, that already, we have Dana Yoga. Then Rahu is the 4th and 11th lord, 4th and 9th lord. And then, so that's another Dana Yoga, or a bigger Dana Yoga. Then we have Dana Yogas through Graha Drishtis, mutual Graha Drishtis, the 11th lord in the 2nd with Drishti, mutual Drishti to the Lagna lord, and the 9th lord, and the 10th lord. So we have a lot of Dana wealth being exhibited here. And to have a truly huge Dana Yoga, you need the involvement of the Hora Lord. And if we look at the very bottom of the page, in the Panchanga, the little last bit there says Mars, 5 minutes, sign Leo. That Mars is the Hora Lord. So, the Dana Yoga is very significant. So even though it is a tough combination, it makes for a person who's not always, who can sometimes be more than most people can handle, you could say. and how this combination could be viewed as a terrible combination when you take into account the Vargas, and we see how the planets are, they're actually what how they're actually interacting with our karmas. We get a much more broad picture, and we get the picture of someone who is going to achieve greatness. You know, we have this beautiful Achyutānanda Lagna. So we technically, in the beginning, the Achyutānanda Lagna is here, but it's going to shift to this sign over here, to Aquarius with Jupiter and Sun. So this is where we get that, like, his image of being, there was a campaign where it was like Mike. If one want to be like Mike, and you have this Jupiter Sun. It's Atmakaraka in the Sun, Atmakaraka in Digbala in the Achyutānanda Lagna, and it is being aspected by this Mars Rahu. So we have the red and black, right? It's part of his image, the red and black with the bulls, which is part of this lunar thing going on. I hope you guys enjoyed a little look into this, and if you did, please like and subscribe. I wish you all the best. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Until next time.